Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Let's take a look at the Fn or globe key on your Mac keyboard and everything that it can do. MACMOST is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 1,000 supporters. Go to MACMOST.com/Patreon. There you could read more about it, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. So on your Mac keyboard you've got a key that either is labeled Fn or has both Fn and a little globe symbol on it. Apple's now calling this the globe key or just using that symbol to represent that key. But it's the same if you have an older keyboard. Just use the Fn key instead. On small Mac keyboards like on MacBooks you'll find it at the lower left corner. On larger keyboards that have a numeric keypad you're going to find it in the middle grouped together with the page up, page down, home, and end keys. Now this is a modifier key much like Command, Control, Option, and Shift. But it works in a different way than those other keys. For one thing, you can also press it and release quickly to use it as a normal trigger for something. You also have a variety of keyboard shortcuts that you could use by holding this Fn or globe key and then pressing a letter. Let's start off by talking about using it with the function keys. So the function keys are the ones at the top of your keyboard. Unless you've got a touch bar, you've got a row of keys there labeled F1, F2, F3, and so on. There are also some special feature symbols on there like screen brightness and volume controls. Now if we go to System Settings and then look under Keyboard, then go to Keyboard Shortcuts, there's a listing here on the left for function keys. The only setting there is a switch, and this determines how those keys are used in conjunction with the Fn or globe key. So with this turned off, then those keys work by default with the special features. So for instance the F1 key will lower screen brightness. However, if I turn this on, then the F1 key sends the F1 signal to whatever app you're using. So an app may use F1 as a keyboard shortcut for something. In this case, if this is on, you would hold the Fn or globe key down to get it to behave as if it were off. And if this were off, you would hold the Fn or globe key down to get it to behave like it was on. A lot of people don't use these F keys for any kind of keyboard shortcuts at all. So having this turned on all the time makes sense so you have quick access to things like volume control at the top of your keyboard. But either way you can toggle to be the opposite using this Fn key. So in addition to acting as a modifier for that top row of function keys, the Fn key can work on its own to do certain things. You've got that setting right here in Keyboard where we were before. On my Mac it says press Fn key 2. On your Mac it may show the globe symbol there. And then I can change what it does. I could have it switch between input sources. So for instance if I switch between say English and another language on my keyboard it could switch between those. I could have it show the emoji and symbols viewer. I could have it start dictation. You actually have to press the key twice really quickly to do that. And I could turn it off. So pressing the Fn key by itself will do nothing. If you have it set to these first two you press and release. You don't hold it down for any amount of time. Now since the Fn key is a modifier key you can change how it works completely by going to Keyboard Shortcuts here and then going to Modifier keys. Here you've got a list of all your modifier keys including Caps Lock. And you can change what they do. So for instance if you wanted to switch Control for Command you could do that by changing Control to Command and Command to Control. But you also have the function key here. You can set that up to be another Control, Option, or Command key. You could set it up to trigger Escape or you can have it do nothing at all. One really useful thing to do here is if you don't use the Caps Lock key like I don't and you want to have an extra Fn key, I can change Caps Lock to actually be a second Fn key. Now there's one more place you can go in System Settings and do something with the Fn key. And that's to go to Desktop and Dock. And then all the way at the bottom you'll find Mission Control. And there are shortcuts for Mission Control. Go into here and you can access some things that aren't available in the regular keyboard settings. Here I can set Mission Control for instance to be a variety of different keys including F keys if I want. But one of the keys I can set it to is the Fn key. So I could do this for any of these. If I want Application Windows, also known as App Expose, to be the Fn key, I can. I could set it down here and then use Fn to trigger that. Now in addition to those there are some keyboard shortcuts you can use with the Fn key. So for instance if I were to use Fn and N it will bring up the notification center, and doing it again will dismiss it. I could also bring a control center with Fn and C, although it's not as useful because you really can't control anything here with the keyboard. So you still have to switch to your mouse or trackpad to interact with this. And you can also use Fn and Shift and A. This is the only keyboard shortcut that requires another modifier key with the Fn key. And this will bring up Launchpad, and you can do the same thing to dismiss it. And remember that with Launchpad you don't have to actually use the trackpad or mouse for anything. You can simply type the name of the app, and when you get it singled down to that one you can press return and launch that app. So you can launch any app using this keyboard shortcut and simply typing in Launchpad. It's similar to, but actually a little faster than using Spotlight, since this doesn't do anything except launch apps. Now if you ever want to get to the desktop you can use the F11 key to do that. And depending on your settings you can also click on the desktop background to do it in macOS Sonoma. But there's also the Fn and H, think of it as H for hide, to hide everything. And you can use it again to reverse it. Also for an app window, of course, you probably know you can go to the green button here and enter full screen. You could also go to View and enter full screen. And notice the keyboard shortcut here is Fn and F. So you can use Fn and F to go into full screen mode. So this creates a separate space for this one window. And you can use Fn and F to get out of it. You can also use Fn and Q for Quick Note. And this will launch notes if it's not already launched and create a new Quick Note or go to the current Quick Note that you're working with. When you're typing and want to type an emoji or special character, you probably know you can use Control, Command, and Space to bring up the emoji and special character viewer. But you can also do it with Fn and E. And you saw before how there was a way to set it up so just pressing Fn would bring this up. And if you want to start dictation, then you can use Fn and D and dictate text. And then use Fn and D to turn it off. If you have the big keyboard with the numeric keypad like I do, then you have page up, page down, home, and end. But if you don't have that, you can simulate it using the Fn key. Just Fn and down is page down. Fn and up is page up. Fn and the right arrow is end, and Fn and the left arrow is home. Of course, how those work depends on what the app you're using does with those special keys. Now, of course, on any Mac keyboard you have a delete key at the top right, and that will backspace and delete the character before the text cursor. If you want to forward delete, well, if you've got a numeric keypad, there's a forward delete button. If you don't, you can use Fn and the delete key, and it will delete the character ahead of the cursor. And here's one last thing the Fn key will do. If you use Fn and A, it will move focus to the dock. Notice how suddenly the Finder at the bottom left is selected. I can now use the arrow keys to move around and the spacebar to launch an app. And note that if you have dock hiding turned on, so it's only there if you move your pointer to the bottom of the screen, then Fn and A will reveal the dock as well as bringing the keyboard focus there. You can also use the up arrow and go into the menu for each individual app. So it's really handy that you can do Fn and A and see how it resumes with reminders selected like I had before. But if I press the L key it will jump to the first icon there that has a name that begins with L. So Launchpad. And now I can use up arrow and it will go to the Launchpad menu, which gives me an alphabetical list of all apps. So now if I do F, it'll jump to the section with apps that start with F, and I can continue to navigate from there and press space or return to select something and launch an app. So you can do an awful lot of keyboard navigation using the Fn and A key and then the arrow keys and letter keys to move around in the dock and get a lot done. You can even use home and end and page up and page down to move around inside of the dock as well as different letters. So there's a ton of stuff you can do. If you put the right things in the dock, the apps that you need, and maybe some files and folders to the right, you can accomplish quite a bit with this that may not otherwise seem possible to do easily with just the keyboard. So there's a look at some of the things that the Fn or globe key can do for you. Hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.